My guest today on this episode is one of my favorite humans, Rachel Kove. Rachel is an actor, a musician, a mental health care professional, and so much more. I could just go on and on with that, but I'm just going to say welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
So happy you're here.
I'm so happy I'm here. You're also one of my favorite humans.
Well, how cool. We're in the fellow human, favorite human admiration club.
Yeah, it's like a special club.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful.
Let's dive in.
Let's dive.
When you think about the idea or the concept or the understanding that there is a place within us that is whole, complete, and unharmable, that regardless of what we've done or regardless of what's happened in our life, that can never be touched. I know that's a lot, but what comes up for you?
I think what comes up for me is hope and excitement and truth that's real. And it's very different than what we're fed in the mental health addiction field. It's very different than what we're fed in the medical field. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what life would look like if we lived from that consciousness in the world. It took me a long time to get to that point where I really believed that, because for so long I was given this message of something's wrong with me, I'm sick, I have a disease that's incurable, I'm sick and you're gonna die.
Right.
For so long. And it took me a lot of healing, a lot of work with a trauma therapist, a lot of meditation, a lot of journaling to realize that was not true. And that there is a very deep place within me before the trauma, before the bad things happened, that is unharmable. That's my soul. Mm-hmm. You can't harm my soul. It's here. It came here for a reason. It's going to leave here having done a lot, and so I love that you're speaking with that language.
Well, thank you. And I'm curious because you said it was a journey, right?
Yeah.
Is there a moment that stands out for you that was like something that was pivotal? Was there a moment where you got to understand that at a deeper level? Or a moment where you were just like, this paradigm of like continuing to talk about myself as damaged or broken just is no longer working? Or was it more a gradual process for you?
I feel like it was more of a gradual process because I stopped drinking when I was 16 years old. I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16 years old. I went to a residential treatment when I was 16 years old. I then started working in the addiction mental health field when I was 21 years old. So for 16 years, I had been observing patterns of behavior. I had been working with people all over the world from every walks of life. Didn't matter whether you were white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Chinese. Didn't matter whether you were a billionaire or you grew up with no money. Didn't matter whether you were obese or thin. There was just this common thread that I saw. And I also saw that the symptoms of what people were dealing with addiction were all the same, whether you were dependent on alcohol or drugs or porn or sex or food or sugar or gambling. It didn't matter. It was all the same. And so I started to question why. And I started to go, well, wait a minute. What if this isn't what everyone thinks it is? And what if it's not this disease? And what if people are not broken? And what if you're whole? And what if you were really hurt? And what if you were really traumatized? And what if you grew up in an environment that did not support a soul to thrive, right? Like, what if you grew up in an environment with traumatized parents who weren't given the tools that they needed in order to raise a child in the way that they needed to raise a child effectively because they weren't taught? And what if they didn't have the money to raise a child in the way that they needed to raise a child and be present for the child in the way that the child needed to be present, right? And what if they didn't learn the tools? And I started asking all these different questions outside of what I was told, that this person had bipolar, or that this person was borderline, or that this person was an addict. I thought, okay, maybe that's true. what else could be true?
What else could be true? And I love that question because for me, it's not an outright rejection of that. It's more of a curiosity. Well, what does it create? What does it create when I think there's this condition that a person has, whether that's the disease of addiction or this diagnosis? And what if, rather than seeing them as that's who they are, it's what they have? And then being curious about why they have that.
Yeah.
Right. And that it actually was a strategy to manage something. I mean, I look back on my own journey and I think about feeling so damaged and so broken and just being so shut down. Of course, weed and alcohol saved my life. Of course, it made me happy. Of course, I loved it and I wanted more. Yeah, I probably did cross a line that many would look at as an addiction, including myself. And then getting sober, though, it became this journey of an awakening that took me many, many years, but I had a few moments that were like a peak experience, if you will, of like a recognition that like, that's not who I am. That's something that I was using to manage something that felt so damaged and broken. And I say this all the time, but shame doesn't heal shame. And so if I come in and say someone's broken, even if I'm thinking it, there's a felt sense of that in the room. And, you know, my first mentor, Mary Helen, saw me as a whole and complete person, and I could feel her seeing me that way. It wasn't what she was saying, it was how she was being. And then what does that create? And what's that possibility? Because you said hope, and I love that. What's a different possibility than diagnosing someone or looking at them as broken? And then what's required of us? Because I see people jumping into the addiction treatment field when they're newly sober. They haven't done a lot of their own work. Like, you were young and you were 5 years sober. What was that journey like for you? And how did it start to shift the way not only you saw yourself, but your clients?
Well, what a great question. At that time, I was very governed and absorbed in the 12-step paradigm. So when I started working in the addiction field, I started working at a sober living, which is where a lot of people start. And I really had no intention of working in the addiction field. Unfortunately, my mom went through a lot of really difficult grief around losing my stepdad. And unfortunately, we lost our house and we lost our dog, and the bills couldn't be paid anymore. And I was 2 years sober and had to get a job. And I was really, really passionate about helping other people. And my mom said, well, why don't you reach out to so-and-so? You're in AA, you love working with other individuals. See if you can get a job at the sober living, working as an overnight manager.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that meant sleeping at a house from 12 to 8 and managing 10 women. By the way, I had no training.
Right, of course.
Which is very common, right?
Right.
But I was sober, right? So therefore, I'm skilled enough to handle all of that. I'm being sarcastic. So yeah, I started working there, and I was really good at it because I had a deep, deep, deep compassion for people. I had a lot of trauma growing up. I love my mom and dad, and there's that quote that I forgot who says it, but they said that parents do the best that they can with the consciousness that they have. And at that time, I don't believe that I was being parented in a way that was really guiding me to success. I'm a twin. I grew up in the world of Hollywood, which is a very interesting world. And I was very kind of mystified by this culture of, as long as you're wealthy, as long as you're famous, as long as a man loves you, you're going to be happy. And it just, that never seemed to work. I don't know. I saw a lot of people with a lot of money. I saw a lot of people who were extremely famous. And I always saw this sense of dissatisfaction with life. So I don't know, by the time I was in my early 20s, you know, it was kind of unusual to be sober, right? And I met all these amazing women, and they were struggling with really being happy, and they were struggling with feeling included in their family, and they were struggling with feeling accepted in the world, and they were heroin addicts and sex addicts, and I went in there like, all right, I have no idea what I'm doing, but here we are. And I slowly climbed the ladder, and I started becoming a case manager, and I started running the facility, becoming a program director. And then I started working at a treatment center, and then I moved to another sober living and started running the facilities. And here's what I have seen over and over and over again. The model is broken. And I say that with so much love because I don't think people are trying to make people worse. I genuinely think the people that are working in the mental health and addiction field are some of the most beautiful human beings on the planet. And all they want to do is help people restore connection and trust with their families. They want to help people grow. They want to help people be happy. They want to help people in the worst moments of their life. In the worst moments of their life, when their kid has overdosed and then woke up. When they have lost their home and lost their car and lost their kids and they can't stop shooting heroin, and they're going to call this interventionist, and you're going to get on the phone with them and you're going to help them get in a treatment center. They're superheroes. And also, there are a lot of codependent people, right? And so the model in some way is not set up for people to really become an autonomous individual with their own belief systems. I don't know. I see a lot of people opening up residential treatment centers over and over and over again when we aren't lacking residential treatment centers. We're lacking community. We're lacking people that really know who they are, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of families don't know how to deal with people when they get better. That's what I see. A lot of families don't know how to deal with their kid when all of a sudden they start to change and all of a sudden they start to individualize. Because something I really want to see change is, how do we help families? Not just the sick person get better. How does a whole family change? How did that whole family get into this system that is rooted in codependency, people-pleasing, people not talking about their emotions, people avoiding uncomfortable conversations, people lacking boundaries, people shaming their child for crying, people whooping their child for crying, parents that pressure their kids to be these sports stars, and the kids don't really want to be these like sports stars. So I know I kind of went all over the place, but I'm just really trying to be part of a movement that really helps families heal, helps individuals feel safe in their bodies to have the life that they really truly want to live, with boundaries and with this state of mind that I'm not sick, I'm not broken. Because that really harmed me.
Yeah.
That really harmed me.
Well, because people already feel broken. And so if we add to that by creating systems where we're looking at the person as broken, then it just confirms that. And most of that isn't conscious or even said, but it's a felt sense, right?
Yeah.
Someone comes to treatment, they feel broken, and then they get diagnosed with these things and say, that's what's wrong. Here's how to change your behavior because there's something wrong with the behavior. And if we pull out a little bit, because I think there's two different avenues we can easily go down right now. One is families, which I would love to bookmark and come back to. But let's talk about the treatment paradigm. And I was flashing back when I first started doing a lot of speaking, working in the behavioral health field. I did a talk called Shifting the Treatment Paradigm. And that was like kind of my thing for years, because I saw like people coming back to treatment over and over and over again and getting the exact same paradigm, and then wondering why they're coming back to treatment and not really getting to the root of the matter, not getting down to looking at the person beyond the behavior and look at the actual root causes. And then also from this place of greater consciousness, that's like, how can I see the potential in you if you in this moment have lost access to it or believe you've lost access to it. And in some ways that sounds really intangible, but to me it's completely tangible. Because when I'm anchored in knowing who and what I am, and I'm not here to put on the hero cape and rescue you and fix you, and you're not broken and I'm not here to save you, the paradigm shifts. And it's something that I know you understand very deeply. So I'm wondering, for anyone watching right now or listening right now, how do we start to shift this? I know there are systemic things, but there's also the individuals working in the field, and it's a multi-layered question, I guess.
For me, I started to shift this when I really started to examine my codependency, my attachment to outcomes, my attachment to strategies that were created from a place of survival. I think that most people have no idea that they're living in a state of survival. And I don't just mean money, like not having money. I mean survival mechanisms through behavior. People pleasing is a survival mechanism. Codependency is a survival mechanism. Addiction is all a survival mechanism. So what am I surviving from?
Yeah.
I need to look at my childhood. I need to understand my relationship to my mom. I need to understand my relationship to my dad. I need to understand, what pain have I been running from? Where did I not feel enough? Where did I feel unworthy?
Yeah.
And in homes where codependency is created, it's this idea of, I live in a home and it is so emotionally unpredictable. And the child doesn't know how to deal with the anxiety that comes from living in a home that feels emotionally unpredictable. And they have to depend on mom and dad to take care of them, right? So they develop these strategies because on the inside, they're feeling so uncomfortable and they're feeling all this tension and they're feeling this anxiety. And they walk into the room and they really need mom and dad, but mom and dad are not present and they're not connected, and they're feeling confused because, hey, I need mom and dad to regulate my nervous system, but mom and dad don't know how to regulate their own nervous system. And I have to depend on them, right? So what do? Well, I need to figure out a way to deal with this anxiety. Well, how do I change me to make mom and dad happy? It's this sense of, I'm going to unconsciously get into a place of control. I'm going to control this discomfort by doing something that makes mom and dad, quote unquote, happy.
Yeah.
And that makes an amazing people pleaser. And in this industry, you will see that we're kind of repeating this. We're kind of becoming these recreators of our childhoods and fixing these lives of these people and making them believe that they are broken because we're kind of coming in and fixing. Well, what do I have to, if something's not broken, why do I have to fix it?
Yes, and what you're saying is so powerful, because I can't help someone learn how to use the jargon, regulate their own nervous system, if I haven't been able to do it for myself. If I'm not comfortable in my own beingness, then I'm automatically going to want to try to help you do that. But if I haven't done that for myself, not only am I not modeling that, but I'm not creating the safe space for them to actually have that experience. And really, that's the work we do. We create, because we talk about holding space a lot. I can't hold a space to allow someone to have a deeper experience than I've had myself. Because if not, then I'm just trying to get you to do that. And I think what ends up happening then is I end up doing this work for me, not for the person sitting in front of me. And it's not conscious. It's like I'm trying to heal something by doing this work, and I'm trying to heal it externally. But that's also a definition of addiction.
Yeah.
I'm trying to heal something that feels out of place internally, externally. So I like to be provocative and say the only thing I really need to do for my client is my own healing. And my own healing has to be the anchor, because I can't possibly be present for you if I haven't done enough work on me. And if you're going to talk about your trauma and I haven't done enough work on mine, I'm going to unconsciously shift the conversation or go to a paradigm of like, you're not ready to address that yet. And that's really what I mean by unharmable. To realize that there's a place within someone that is not only resilient, but has never been harmed is a very different starting point, because we say things like, they're not ready to address their trauma yet.
Yeah.
And I will say, they're here for the 6th time. How are we going to allow them to be ready?
Yeah.
And I do think, I want to be clear, I do think there are times when people aren't ready, but I think that's become the default. And that default gets in the way of this higher possibility. And what's required of me is to do enough of my own work so that I can be truly present for you.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because I came here today feeling really overwhelmed. And in this moment, I'm feeling emotional, and I'm pausing and present with it. And my son is here at the studio in the back, and I arrived feeling emotional. I arrived feeling burnt out, and I think to myself, well, isn't that kind of beautiful? And I thought, oh man, now I have to go pretend like I'm perfect. And I thought in this moment, well, what if I just talk about where I'm at? And what if I just say, hey, I'm so perfect in my imperfection right now. I am so okay in this burnout. I am so good in this moment, even though I'm feeling really insecure, right? Because sometimes I have felt like this pressure to be perfect in this world. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yes.
I really do. I think that perfectionism and codependency, those two things are underneath every alcoholic I've worked with.
Well, and let's go a little deeper, because I agree with you wholeheartedly that these strategies we develop, and I don't call them survival mechanisms, I call them brilliant strategies.
I love that you call them that.
Because we do we brilliantly find ways to survive the family system in the world.
Yeah.
Like me just being a little gay boy in Indiana in the 1970s, that alone caused me to need to learn how to act differently around people to feel like I could stay safe. So of course I'm going to be like, I'm a show person, I'm dancing and singing, I'm not going to let you see me because I've used this as a strategy. The deeper work to me is to go back and look at when I developed the strategy for survival, or the strategy for safety is probably more accurate, because you said, if I do this, mom and dad will love me, or they'll be happy, right? And
they'll be happy.
They'll be happy. But the deeper work is, what did I actually absorb and decide about myself? And how has that become the operating system for my life? I'm unworthy. You talked about worthiness.
Yeah.
And if we get down to it, in about 100% of the clients I've worked with, it's I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy. There's other variations, but those are kind of the most popular hits, if you will. And that becomes the operating system. And then all the strategies are to manage, please don't see that. Mm-hmm. And I don't even want to see that. Mm-hmm. And so then we work with clients who, let's say perfectionism. About 99% of the time, that's managing a sense of unworthiness. I'm going to achieve, and I'm telling my own story, by the way, I'm going to achieve and look good so you don't see that I actually feel damaged, broken, and unworthy. So the deeper work is, at what age did you start deciding this? Not that we have to go back and re-experience the trauma, because it's alive in us today, but to go back and ask when we decided and absorb that, and remember our brains weren't developed, so we don't think ourselves out of this. It's not a cognitive process, even though a lot of the modalities are focused on the mind and how to change the narrative. It really is, let me embrace, and you said something so important, let me feel that which didn't get felt.
Yeah.
That's the deeper work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that somewhere along the way, I learned that if I'm messy, I'm unlovable. If I'm feeling insecure, I won't be liked by a boy. I was a always have always had a very tough personality. Toughness and being tough was very valued in my home growing up. And showing weakness was not valuable. So being emotional and being vulnerable was something to avoid. And with the thousands of people I've worked with, that's a very common theme. Yeah. And I do believe that in order to heal and in order to really access that wholeness from within, we have to take risks and be vulnerable. We really do. And that's so hard because being vulnerable is where we were hurt, because children are nothing but vulnerable. Children are nothing but authentic, perfect beings. And they're being completely themselves. And then they're ripped away from that authenticity because they're being dragged into someone else's trauma.
That's right. And you know, you said this earlier, and it's so true. Like my parents, for example, got married when I think they were 19 and 20. They had immense amounts of trauma.
Yeah.
My dad was not in love with my mother and was told to marry her.
Yeah.
I mean, the layers to that are just outrageous. And then I look at like the trauma my dad and his brothers experienced and then ultimately became perpetrators of that same type of trauma. My mom, you know, had this certain set of trauma that showed up she had all her sisters had this kind of trauma. So, you know, these are kids.
Yeah.
19 and 20.
Yeah.
By the time the three of us were born, they were still in their 20s with 3 kids. And I think back to my 20s, I'm like, I'm just trying to figure out how to not feel broken.
Yeah.
Like how to not feel damaged.
Yeah.
And I think about trying to manage 3 kids with that. So I have compassion for them, a lot of it. And at the same time, there was still a lot of pain from growing up in that household.
Yeah.
And I've learned, and this to me, it took a while, because first I just wanted to say they did the best they could. Everything's fine. I wanted to minimize. I wanted to bypass. Then I went into how horrible and abusive they were. And then I landed in a place where it's like, this stuff happened. Yes, they did the best they could, but this also happened. And it's my responsibility to heal it, not theirs.
Yeah, well, I'm getting emotional. I guess that's just what needs to happen today, because it is so hard to talk negatively about your parents. I love my mom and dad so much, and I love my family so much. And there was a lot of harm, and I don't feel at all like it was intentional. Forgive them, Father, if they don't know what they don't know. If you're blinded and you're unconscious, you just don't know. Yeah. So a human being's work is to become aware, is to become conscious, because I was in so much utter turmoil as a child, as a teenager, that I thought that alcohol and attempting suicide would be the best solution to end my pain. And that's what it was. It was just pain. I wasn't broken. You know, they tried diagnosing me with all these things, and they actually couldn't even figure it out because I was so high functioning. I was such a highly competitive athlete, you know, and I was in my elementary age, 8, 9, 10, they were telling my parents, you should really put her in the Olympic development team for soccer. You should really check that out. It was hard to see, you know what I mean? It's hard. It's easy to miss when you're so controlled by needing to succeed and make money and worship and idolize this perception and this image of being successful. That to me is the most fascinating thing. I started writing this play recently called The Priority is Denial. And for me, I look at how many parents and human beings prioritize unconsciously denial and avoidance of the dysfunction that exists in the home, right? I worked with a client recently, and their child became an addict at like 13, and they had no idea. I'm like, how do you miss that, right? Same thing with me though. Like I became a heavy drinker by the time I was 13 and a half. It's actually really easy to miss if you are so consumed by needing to prove yourself. If you're a parent and you haven't dealt with that unworthiness, that little child is governing your behaviors.
Well, and what's important about this is that's shame. Shame is, I believe I'm broken. And if a parent believes they're broken, one of the ways it might manifest is to have the perfect child. And so the perfect child, it's not the only way it manifests, but one way it might. And the perfect child then becomes the outpicturing of how the parent wants everyone to see the family. And so if anything other than that shows up, it can be dismissed. And it's unconscious 90% of the time. Someone's not even aware of it. I remember my mom, when we were growing up, she would look at the ceiling, Tom, if you're having an affair, I don't want to know. And I was like, you are literally aware right now. I mean, I was a kid thinking, you know he's having affairs. I know who he's having affairs with. I could make a list. And when they got divorced, I made the list and she said, how did you know that? And I said, how did you not? And I remember that thought I had and that question I had. First of all, it wasn't very loving of me. I was a teenager, so I did the best I could at the time. How could you not? But she had built up a mechanism to not look because the entire structure of safety would be questioned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's so much to this. There's so much to this. I've analyzed this for a long time. Maintaining an image is how people kept their jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Women didn't get to work in the past. So they had to dismiss a lot of intolerable, unacceptable behavior because they couldn't provide for their children. They couldn't provide for themselves. I get emotional thinking about it because, I mean, I'm always emotional, but one of the benefits of healing is you're always feeling. But like, I think about being a mother now, right? And I can't go get a job. I can't work. I'm not allowed to work. Okay, so what do I have to do? I have to go marry someone who can go work. Now, what if that man is, and I am not bashing men. I love men, and I hate what's going on in our culture right now with how we just bash men. I can't stand it. But back in the day, like, men were the ones that could work, right? So if that man was violent, abusive, alcoholic, was cheating on me, I had to suck it up. And again, I had to suck it up to survive so that I could provide for my kid, take care of my kid, right? But then a kid is growing up in that tension.
Right.
The kid is growing up in that tension, right? When you go back to the silent generation and the baby boomers was the child of the silent generation, right? That silent generation was growing up and dealing with World War I and World War II. And one of the best ways to survive chaos is dissociation. Well, if I'm dissociated, I'm not present with you. I can't attune to your nervous system.
Well, and also I think about my dad, like, men in his generation were taught to not feel. Like, you are going to be a man, and the man is going to be smart and strong. Smart and strong. You're the provider. That's what you do. He met his dad once. He shook his hand once. And so in his world, he was a very present father.
Yeah.
Right? By comparison.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about shame and the way that shame, like the gift that keeps on giving, right? We pass it down generationally. The way we heal it is we interrupt and we start to feel. So your demonstration of emotion is really important because shame lives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. I will give Brene Brown credit for that. She says those are the three things that cause shame to grow in the petri dish. And so I then, of course, ask, well, what's the opposite of secrecy, silence, and judgment? That's the way we work with shame. It's vulnerability, it's authenticity, it's creating a safe space to actually feel, to actually talk about what's going on. I think sometimes people think the way you heal shame is by talking about everything, and there is an aspect of that that's true. The deeper work for me is the feeling of everything. Because to me, I was swimming in oatmeal. That's how I describe shame. I felt broken. I felt damaged. I'm trying to get out of this. Please, no one see how damaged I feel. I'm going to look good. I'm going to try to have it all together. I'm going to overspend so I look good. All the things that I have gone through in my life. And it was all protecting this belief of my brokenness, but it wasn't the truth of who I am.
Yeah.
And so to understand the place of unharmability as a starting point is to say, I'm actually not my shame. Shame is the experience of me believing all of this stuff that I absorbed from society and from my family, from my school system. I mean, abusive teachers, some great teachers too, but some really abusive ones, and a system that is created in many ways to keep everyone in alignment. So being able to land in the place of the unharmable as the starting point and then say, yeah, I decided and absorbed all this stuff. And it's a twofold process of unlearning and being really curious about all the decisions I've made, and returning to that place of inner perfection.
Yeah, well, it's so profound what you just said. I think deciding that I am my soul. I am not my behaviors. I am not my emotions. I am not my trauma. The human experience, we identify with things to deal with this three-dimensional reality.
Yeah.
This ego. Thank God for the ego. The ego gets a bad rap. The ego helps us fit in.
Yeah.
And we do need to fit in by a tribe in order to be protected by the tribe, but we're not survivalists anymore. It's kind of a problem, to be honest with you.
Unless we want to be.
Unless we want to be.
Right. Which is like, people are like, well, it can't be that simple that the way to have world peace is to find peace within. I'm like, imagine for a moment what you just said.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's the only thing that's ever going to work.
Yeah.
The only thing that's ever going to work is for me to do enough of my own healing to understand that peace is from within, and that there's a place within me that's unharmable, and I'm no longer in the fight.
Yeah, well, you said something really interesting earlier. You said shame doesn't always heal by talking about what you're feeling or thinking or the thing you're afraid to talk about in front of someone else. Yes, that is part of it.
It's part of it.
It's also feeling the feeling of unworthiness.
Yeah.
It's becoming the adult parent to your inner child and sitting with that part that has felt so unworthy. I sat with you one time and I remember this so clearly. You said, what if when a client says, I feel so unworthy? What if instead of jumping in and saying, no, you're totally worthy. Yeah. What if we just sit with them?
Yeah.
And be with them while they feel that unworthiness? Because when I look back at my childhood, what I lacked was presence. I lacked people just being with me. It wasn't until I met my stepdad did I realize how important presence is. My stepdad would pick me up and he would take me on a drive and we would go sit at Starbucks. And he did nothing but just ask me questions and just listen to my response. He changed my life in that because he showed me what it means to be listened to. He showed me what it means for someone to be curious in how I think and feel and not alter it, rather just be with it. And right now, I think a lot of people have never experienced that.
Yeah, and there's two things I want to say about that. I want to speak to the simplicity of that.
Yeah.
Because simple is almost always the most powerful.
Yeah.
The simplicity of what I can provide for myself and another person is true presence. It is profoundly simple.
Yeah.
And then the second piece is, well, what's required from me in order to be able to do that? Because if I'm lost in my own identification with my trauma or my thoughts or my past, and if I'm in that hamster wheel, like the Buddhists call it monkey mind, if I'm constantly in that, I can't be present for you. I can pretend to be. I can look at you and I can nod my head. But if I'm here spinning, vibrating, really, I'm wound up internally, you might not say, this person is wound up internally. But when a person is truly present, you feel something.
You do. And I feel it now.
Right.
Yeah.
And that gets created when we're willing to be in a space and be truly authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Then it emerges and something so powerful happens. You and I love facilitating groups, and the thing we do with groups is let it be in the room. Let it be in the room. Be curious about what's in the room. Be curious. And that takes a lot. It takes a lot to be able to let it emerge.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to not run from what emerges. Right.
Or try to fix what's emerging.
Or try to fix it, right? When you have this brain that has this fight or flight mechanism, and if the stimulus is emotion, right? If there is any emotion that you have a fight or flight connection to, right? Shame, right? Embarrassment, unworthiness, right? Sadness, grief, frustration. if you never learned how to relax into those emotions, right? And if your parents shamed you, dismissed you, invalidated you, punished you, hurt you physically when those emotions were in you, then your brain comes up with a very quick defense mechanism because it thinks you're about to be harmed.
And what I'm really in touch with right now is the paradox of what you're saying. What I want most is to be seen, and yet what I'm most afraid of is to be seen.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like that, you're dating someone and they're available, for example.
Oh yeah, I would have never gone for that
Yeah.
for 20 years. No,
Fuck
please.
no.
No, actually do not be available.
Well, in my own healing, that was actually more scary.
Yeah.
Being loved.
Right.
Because for me, love was confusion. Yeah. It was, I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be assaulted. Love was very scary for me.
Yeah.
Right. So an unavailable man was really familiar to me.
Well, and not only that, but if there's a belief in your own unworthiness or own unlovability, then you're going to unconsciously choose that person.
Yeah.
Right. And so we talk a lot about how we keep attracting unavailable people. And the real question is, what is it about this person that I'm attracted to? And what's the reason for that? Yeah. Not from a place of self-criticism or blame or judgment, but from true curiosity. Like, isn't it interesting that I keep choosing this? Yeah,
well, especially in today's culture, I think that's an important question because now the go-to is, well, he's just a narcissist.
He's toxic.
Why are you attracted to the narcissist?
Yeah,
when I trauma bond with people, right? When I trauma bond with people, which I have, right? We all do. I sit more with, why did I choose that? What was familiar about this dynamic?
Vibrationally.
Yes, vibrationally. Yeah. What was familiar about this dynamic? That's more powerful for me than just going, well, he's a narcissist. Because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep dating the same quote unquote narcissist until I realize it's not the narcissist. I'm attracted to the narcissist.
But not from a place of blaming yourself, but a place of curiosity on how to heal it.
Exactly. A place of, I need to now go within and teach that little girl the love that I needed at the time when I decided I should just be in unavailability because that is what I can get. I'd rather get breadcrumbs than be starving. Right? So I need to teach that little girl within me, hey, we can actually have a full course meal. Let me show you what that is.
Well, and here's the bottom line with this, Rachel. When I understand and have made contact with that place within me that is unharmable, it's also a place where I understand that I'm not fundamentally broken. And if I understand, not intellectually, but experientially, that that's who and what I am, I'm not looking to the world to try to fix or heal that because I'm not broken.
Yeah.
And when I'm in that, when that shifts, then it's like, ooh, what do I actually want? What do I actually want to share?
Well, it is so abundant, and you're like a cap has just been taken off, like a ceiling. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When you realize that you are completely infinite and whole and abundant, you are limitless, right? Because you're only limited by your thinking. And the belief system has a system. The system is thoughts, behaviors, emotions. When that belief system changes, then the system changes, right? So all of a sudden you start thinking differently. All of a sudden you start moving differently, behaving differently. All of a sudden your emotions turn from deep depression into like expression. Like, I look at depression, and I'm so grateful for this. I was saying this a long time, then I heard Dr. Gabor-Mate say it years later. I was like, okay, we're like on the same path here, right? And I always saw depression as pressure deepening.
Yeah.
Right? It's pressure that's deepening. I saw expression as pressure exiting.
Yeah.
When we are expressing, we are the happiest people. When we are in our art, whatever that is, like, I think modern day people see artists as musicians and actors. And yes, of course, those are artists. We're all artists. We're all artists creating from our own individual experience, right? So when we create, we realize everything that we have been through has led me to this moment, right? Our pain can turn into art. Our pain can turn into purpose. That's why I don't want to be a part of this whole cancel culture thing and someone does something bad and now we ostracize them from the world and the community and the tribe, and someone in our family did something bad and now I'm going to blame them the rest of my life. I like feeling powerful. I don't feel like there's power in there. If I need to cut someone off from my family because they behave poorly, that's okay. And I love them. If I have to end a relationship because it's not healthy for me, that's okay. I love them. Our souls met for a reason. I learned something from it. If we can move into things around like, what did I learn from this? What was awakened in me?
Yeah.
Right? What negative patterns did I continue here and why? Right? If we immediately go into the way that I was raised to believe in 12 step, well, you did that because you're sick.
Because you have a defective character.
Because you're defective and your mind and body are broken, and I wasn't changing. In fact, I was actually only getting worse. I became a self-harmer in my 20s.
Yeah.
I had a sponsor. Every single time I called my sponsor would tell me, you did this because you're sick. You did this because you're sick. And then all of a sudden I found myself cutting.
Yeah.
I was never a cutter. But my mind, very susceptible to authority, was being told every day, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick. So I was like, oh, okay.
Well, because hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Sick people act sick, right? And then we're trying to find relief in whatever way we can. Believe it or not, we're at the end of our time. We're going to definitely do a part 2. You will definitely come back. I know you and I are working on other things as well, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for demonstrating what we're talking about, right? To be fully in the room and to allow myself to feel and be present with what is without needing to shift, fix, or manipulate. That to me is the journey. That is actually what we're all here to do and who we're here to be.
Yeah. And I just want to say it wasn't easy.
Right.
I want to look like I'm perfect and happy all the time, and I have to let that go. And in that moment, just to, you just said, because you demonstrated it, what that actually is in the moment, I felt something, and then I was aware of my thoughts. Well, just don't talk about it, right? And so I had to take a risk.
Yeah.
And so take those risks.
Well, and part of that, and that's the process, right? It's the awareness of the mechanism that wants to push it down. Mm-hmm. And that mechanism ran the show for so long. First, I wasn't aware it was there. Then, very painfully, I was aware it was there, but didn't really know how to change it. And then I was able to say, oh, I'm going to choose something different. And it's going to feel like this in the beginning, but ultimately it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Heaven.
It's actual heaven.
Actual heaven. Well, that's the best way to close this conversation. So
Good.
Thank you, Rachel, for demonstrating actual heaven.
Thank you.